Back in 1994, my brother Josh was working as an on-site technician for a large phone company. His role was twofold. Firstly, to set up new lines, and secondly, to find the problem with and fix broken landlines. He was based in a small town, but most of his time was spent catering to farmers in nearby areas. The problems were usually hard to find but easy to fix. Sometimes Josh had to walk half a mile up and down dusty roads to find where a particular cable was broken, and the repair didn't even take 10 minutes. One of these calls, in August of 1994, led him to a rather large family-owned farm. A girl called Casey had called in from a neighbour's house, saying that the family's phone was dead. Josh drove out the next day. I don't know how it's done now, but back then Josh told me that the phone cables were buried together with other cables, sometimes even together with piping, in hollow tubes of either hard plastic or cement. In areas where that wasn't possible, the cables were usually placed on high poles. But in rural areas, where not all houses were connected to the grid, it was sometimes more cost effective to lead the wire, covered in a thick plastic coating, simply along the road. When Josh was called out to the farm, those ground-lead cables were usually at fault. A machinery drove over the cable, an animal ripped it, or maybe some bored kid cut through it. Either way, those jobs kept Josh employed, and so he didn't mind slowly driving along the country roads, stopping every few meters to stop potential breaks. The McDonald farm was an easy case. Already well on the route to the house, Josh spotted the ripped cable. It was a clean cut, and the separated ends had been pulled apart for several meters. Josh figured it was likely from a plough or similar device, a simple accident likely done by the farm owners themselves. He had all the right tools, and Josh fixed the cable break within half an hour. Then he drove to the farm to tell the family the good news and make sure that the problem was fixed. He arrived at the McDonald farm around 4 p.m. The heavy wooden gate was open, and so Josh drove his van straight inside to drive up to the house. When he turned into the gate, Josh saw a cow lying on the driveway. He was used to that. He honked the horn to shoo the cow away. Usually that did the trick. But this particular all-brown cow refused to move. Josh slowed down and drove closer and tried the horn again, longer this time. Still the cow didn't move. There was no way around the cow other than to drive into the ditch next to the driveway, and Josh didn't want to risk breaking the car. Finally, just a few steps away from the cow, he stopped and let the motor roar. When the animal still didn't react, Josh, carefully and well aware that the diseased cow might attack him without warning, got out of the car. He grabbed his toolbox from the back and slowly walked around the car to pass the animal from behind. Only then, 2 steps in front of his car, did he notice the puddle of dark brown, dried blood around the animal. The animal was lying with its head on the floor and towards the direction that Josh had come from. He saw a large gaping cut through the brown throat and 3 long slits along the enlarged stomach. Josh was on edge, but not seriously worried. Occasionally farmers had to put pregnant cows down when the calf refuses to be born, and to get rid of a cow's body is not easy, and it can take days for the specialists to arrive. Josh figured the McDonald family or the veterinarian had tried to save the calf by cutting open the mother's body like a cow's C-section, just without the anesthesia that humans would receive. Likely they killed the mother first by cutting her throat, then when the animal sank to the floor, they cut the body open. From the looks of it, Josh concluded, they hadn't succeeded. The bulge in the cow's body was clearly visible, the calf without a doubt still inside. The skin had been placed back onto its original position, only the cuts and a small gap between the skin flabs was still visible. Josh resisted the urge to look inside the animal's body. Holding his nose, Josh walked around the cow and further towards the farm. The driveway was long. To his right was a pasture with several cows. Some were standing, but most were lying on the grass, probably chewing the cud. To Josh's left was a thick cornfield that made him feel slightly uneasy. Josh reached the farmhouse about 5 minutes later. He called out and rang the doorbell, but there was no response. He knocked against the wooden door and called out again. He thought they might be out, trying to organise the removal of the cow's body in the driveway. To make sure that they weren't just not hearing him, Josh turned to the right and circled the house. He glanced through the windows while he passed them. First the kitchen, then the living room window, but everything seemed calm and dark inside. At this point, before he saw it, Josh told me he began to feel uneasy. There was nothing unusual except the dead pregnant cow, but still he felt a tingling in his legs and back, like a warning of bad news. Then he turned the corner. Josh only saw the scene for a few seconds, but he says he'll still remember it today in a vivid detail, like a photograph burned into his brain. A large dog lay on the back porch. His body was slit open lengthwise, and the organs and intestines were pulled out. Right next to the dog's body lay the bodies of an older couple. The man's body was naked, his head separated from the body and placed between his legs. 2 large cuts went through his body, one from the throat to the groin, and one from left to right through the abdomen. His intestines were pulled out and placed to the left of the body, near the dog. The woman's body was dressed, but the clothes were cut open. A deep cut went through her throat and a large sideways cut through her abdomen. She too was gutted, but what Josh remembers the most, the thing he still has nightmares about, are the bloody spots where her breast should have been. There were 2 straight cuts, as if someone had carefully sliced the breast off her body. Both the man and the woman's eyes and mouth were sewn shut with thick, dark thread. The man's lips were split in several places, as if he had forcibly opened his mouth, but the thread had been stronger than his lips. Josh threw his toolbox on the floor and ran. He turned back around the corner, ran back onto the driveway and towards the dead cow. While running, he saw some of the cows on the pasture were looking at him, following his movements, but most of them were still on the floor. Most of them still hadn't moved. Around one of them, he noticed a large dark puddle on the grass. Josh ran so fast he twice nearly fell over stones or potholes. He stumbled towards the cow, curved to the left around the body and ran around the back of his car to get to the driver's seat. Just before he reached the driver's door, Josh stopped dead in his tracks. The cow was still there, but the flap of skin was pushed further open. The bulge was gone. Inside the cow's abdomen, where Josh had thought a calf was now just a large, gaping hole. Panicked, Josh ripped the car door open. He screamed when he felt the thick brown-red liquid on the door handle. Still, he pulled the door open, looked inside the car and jumped on the driver's seat. He felt a large, squishy ball exploding when his feet pressed on the accelerator. He looked down at his feet to see what it was, and just in that moment, noticed movement in the cornfield to his left. He slammed the key in the ignition, turned it, heard the motor howl, threw the car in reverse and hammered his foot through the squishy mass back on the accelerator. The movement in the cornfield came closer. The car moved backwards and swerved. Josh was barely able to avoid driving into the ditch at the side of the driveway. He slowed down to regain control over the car, saw the corn being pushed aside, then pushed again hard on the accelerator. The car sped backwards, through the wooden gates and back onto the country road. Back in the driveway, just when he was out of the driveway and backing onto the road, Josh saw a figure emerging from the cornfield, a few steps away from the cow. He swears the figure looked like a teenage girl with dark hair covered from head to toes in dried blood. Then Josh sped off. Josh walked into a police station with the cow's heart still stuck around his right foot. The newspaper article said that the McDonald's didn't have any children.